All right, friends, it's time to give you loyal listeners a discount on protein powder. You may or may not know, but I launched my very first protein powder 2 years ago. It's a grass-fed beef isolate with only 3 ingredients: grass-fed beef, either organic cacao or organic vanilla, and organic monk fruit. Now, if you don't want any of the added flavor and sweeteners, you can also just get unflavored. And no matter what flavor you choose, you're getting over 23 grams of protein per scoop, which is going to keep you full and satisfied between meals. I love starting my day with a Fab4 smoothie and breaking my fast with that much protein. It makes a serious difference in my cravings and blood sugar balance the rest of the day, and I've seen it with my clients as well. Now, I never thought I'd own a product company, but when I got pregnant with Sebastian, I realized the majority of protein powders were chemically extracted or enzymatically extracted, and I wanted to use heat and water only. I wanted minimal ingredients because we don't need those emulsifiers, fillers, or added vitamins, minerals, and probiotics. All of those additions increase the chances that it's not going to work for your body, whether it be bloating, digestion issues. I just wanted pure, clean protein to keep you full and satisfied so you could build the most delicious Fab4 smoothie. And I have to say, I'm pretty proud of the flavor. If you take a look at our reviews on Amazon, you'll see 5-star reviews for flavor. And that is key, because if you don't love your Fab4 smoothie and you don't love drinking your protein powder, you're not going to do it. It won't become a habit, and it's consistency that outpaces everything. So if you're here and you're listening and you want to give our protein powder a try, use the code podcast5 for $5 off your order. And let me know if you love it. My favorite ways to apply this protein powder is in my Fab4 smoothie, making freezer fudge, making chocolate milk, making hot chocolate, and throwing the unflavored into all my kids' baked goods. So let me know how you use it. Let me know if you love it, and share this podcast deal with your friends. Dr. Robert Lustig is Professor Emeritus of Pediatrics, Division of Endocrinology at UCSF. He specializes in the field of neuroendocrinology with an emphasis on the regulation of energy balance by the central nervous system. His research and clinical practice has focused on childhood obesity and diabetes. Dr. Lustig holds a bachelor's in science from MIT, a doctorate in medicine from Cornell University Medical College, and a master's of studies in law from UC Hastings College of Law. Dr. Lustig has fostered a global discussion of metabolic health and nutrition, exposing some of the leading myths that underlie the current pandemic of diet-related disease. He believes the food business, by pushing processed food loaded with sugar, has hacked our bodies and minds to pursue pleasure instead of happiness, fostering today's epidemics of addiction and depression. He authored over 100 peer-reviewed articles and several books, including his newest release, Metabolical: The Lure and Lies of Processed Food, Nutrition, and Modern Medicine. I'm so excited to have Dr. Lustig on today's show. Thank you for tuning in. Rob, thank you so much for joining today's podcast. I have been looking forward to this interview for months. I've followed your work since 2009, 2010. So I would say that I'm a huge fan. I'm having one of those moments on the other side of the mic, like, this is really happening. I can't believe it.
Well, please, Kelly, I really don't want any groupies. All right.
Okay.
I want Field to have groupies.
Right. Me too.
But, I'm not looking for any adulation. I'm just doing my job.
Well, I'm going to let you do your job here on the podcast today. I would love if we could go back to the beginning and you could help the audience understand how sugar is metabolized and what you found throughout your research and your work.
Well, I didn't start with sugar. Let me make that very clear. I'm a pediatric endocrinologist. I've always been interested in endocrinology. I've always been interested in neuroendocrinology. Ever since I was in 7th grade, I did a term paper on the hypothalamus. The reason was because Guillemin and Shalley had discovered the first hypothalamic releasing factor called TRH. And so I did a term paper in Science on that. And I said, wow, this is really cool. The brain controls all these hormones, et cetera. And sure enough, I became an endocrinologist and, trained in neuroendocrinology. I did go to MIT undergrad, and I did major in nutritional biochemistry. And they did teach me there that different foodstuffs were metabolized in different ways. And then I went to medical school, and they beat it all out of me. And we basically said none of that mattered. None of that was valuable. The way we take care of patients is calories.
Right.
And, who was I to argue? I'm paying a tuition bill. These are the gurus. I'm a lowly medical student. So, I did what they said. And over the next 20 years, I went into pediatric endocrinology to take care of short kids. And while I was doing it, the short kids got fat on me. And so I realized I had to start taking care of fat kids. And then in 1994, a hormone was discovered called leptin. Now, I knew this was coming. And the reason I knew it was coming was because leptin was discovered at Rockefeller University, where I did my postdoc. And so all of the MD postdocs all knew each other because we all had to take call at the same hospital. So the two people who basically, discovered cloned leptin were Jeff Friedman and Rudy Leibel, both of whom were postdocs in the same hospital. So I knew what they were on to, but it took till 1994 for the paper to be finally published in Nature. Or is it Science? And at that time, I was moving to St. Jude Children's Research Hospital in Memphis, Tennessee. And when I got there, a stable of 30 massively obese patients was waiting for me. And these were all children who had had brain tumors, who had been treated for their brain tumors with either surgery or radiation or chemotherapy. And after the surgery, became massively obese. Now, this form of obesity was known to, doctors for decades. Freilich and Babinski described it in 1901 and called it hypothalamic obesity due to damage to the hypothalamus, which is the, shall we say, energy control center of the brain. So I was, shall we say, in the right place at the right time with the right patient population, and leptin had just been discovered. And so I postulated that these kids must have had normal leptin signaling before the tumor and then lost their leptin signaling after the tumor and after the treatment, so that these kids couldn't see their leptin. And because they couldn't see their leptin, their brains thought they were starving.
Can we take a step back? Can you explain
Sure.
where leptin originates and what it's trying to communicate to the brain?
Of course. So leptin is a hormone that comes from your fat cells and circulates in the bloodstream and goes to the brain and tells the brain, hey, I've got enough energy on board to engage in normal, expensive metabolic processes. I have enough energy to be able to burn so that I can exercise. I have enough energy to go into puberty. I have enough energy to engage in pregnancy. Now, if you can't see your leptin, either because it's not there, because you have a mutation in the leptin gene, which 14 people in the world have, or you have a defect in the receptor for leptin, the protein that binds leptin, which 3 people in the world have, okay, or you're everyone else who's overweight or obese, okay, one way or the other, you are not transducing that leptin signal. Now, if you're leptin deficient, then you give leptin from a bottle and it works. If you are missing your leptin receptor, that's not going to work because you're not giving what's missing. And then finally, if you're leptin resistant, that is, for whatever reason, you can't see your leptin, you're going to get obese by the very nature of that inability to see the signal. So I assumed that these children could not see their leptin signal. Now, what are you going to do for them? So you figure out they can't see their leptin signal. I can't fix a brain. At the time, we didn't even have leptin to be able to give them, from a bottle. So what are we going to do? Well, I went to the literature and I was aware of a very specific animal model where you lesion the hypothalamus with an electrode and these animals become massively obese. So the animal version of hypothalamic obesity. And we knew that these animals had very, very high insulin levels. Insulin. And I know you've heard that word before. All right. So insulin drives energy into fat. So I assumed that these kids, because they couldn't see their leptin, they had to make extra insulin in order to drive more energy into fat, in order to try to generate a higher leptin level, but the brain still couldn't see it because those neurons are dead. And so this became the vicious cycle. Imagine a servo mechanism like the thermostat on your house, all right? And imagine that it's broken and it just keeps blowing heat, because it can't see the temperature. All right, same idea. So what are you going to do? Well, maybe if you get the insulin levels down, maybe you can improve the situation. So I put together a study of 8 kids with this disorder, hypothalamic obesity, and said, all right, let's treat them with a drug that lowers insulin release, which I had in my disposal, called octreotide. Normally it's used for growth hormone secreting tumors, but it also suppresses insulin. And so we did the study, and lo and behold, of the 8 patients, 4 lost a lot of weight, 3 lost a little bit of weight, but at least didn't gain any more, and 1 just stabilized. But the bottom line is these are kids who can't lose weight.
Right.
Okay? George Bray, the father of obesity research in America, back in 1975, took 8 of these kids, locked them up on a ward at UCLA USC Harbor Medical Center, USC, and basically fed them 500 calories a day for a month. 500 calories a day for a month. What do you think their weight did?
It's if insulin's flooding through their body, it's staying the same or going up.
It went up.
Yeah.
It went up on 500 calories a day. It went up. And the reason is because these kids, because of that insulin, would rather store than burn.
Right.
All right. And so you have to fix that. And the only way to fix it is get the insulin down. So we use this medicine to get the insulin down. And sure enough, they started losing weight. But something even more remarkable happened. They started exercising spontaneously.
Oh, that makes my heart so happy.
1 kid became a competitive swimmer. 2 kids started lifting weights at home. 1 kid became the manager of his high school basketball team, running around collecting all the basketballs. These were kids who sat on the couch, ate Doritos, and slept. And now the parents are saying, oh my God, I've got my kid back. Because now they have interest in life.
Right.
Their quality of life improved because we suppressed their insulin. Okay, patient number 1 is the apocryphal story. So I'd never used octreotide before. Okay, and this is the first patient in the study. And I tell the mom, look, I don't know what's going to happen because this is the first time I'm using this medicine. I want to hear from you in a week. She calls me in 4 days. Says, Dr. Lustig, something's happening. I go, like adverse event. I'm thinking, oh my God,
geez.
Shut down the study, go to jail. I'm just ready for the other shoe to drop. Well, what happened? What happened? She says, well, normally we would go to Taco Bell and she would eat 5 tacos and an enchilada and she'd still be hungry. We just went to Taco Bell and she ate 2 tacos and she was full and she just vacuumed the house. Now that was unexpected.
Right.
The vacuuming the house part. Okay, that was unexpected. I want to know what she charges. No, and it turned out that, all these kids started becoming more active. So we did a double-blind placebo-controlled trial after that and showed the exact same thing. And it turned out the quality of life correlated with the degree of insulin suppression. So this is proof. This is causation. This is not correlation. This is causation, saying that when we fixed the biochemistry, we then fixed the behavior, that the biochemistry drives the behavior. Okay, this was the first aha. All right, because everybody else has been talking about gluttony and sloth, diet and exercise. If you're fat, it's your fault. Too bad, and that's it. And I knew that this could not be true because I'm a pediatrician and, we're not pejorative against our patients.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. 6-month-olds do not choose to be obese.
Mm-hmm.
Newborns do not choose to be obese. There are biochemical processes going on that dictate whether or not you're going to, store fat or not. And this proved it in no uncertain terms, and that it was the insulin that did it. All right. So this is, sort of educational point number one for your audience. It's the insulin, stupid. It's not the calories. Okay, it's the insulin. All right. My job is to kill the calorie. That's my goal. Kill the calorie. Okay. Drive a silver stake through its heart so that it never, ever climbs out of its, coffin again. Okay. That is my job. And I will tell you, it is a very difficult, concept for people to get their head around. The calories are irrelevant. Okay. They just do not get that because they've been told for 50, 60, 70 years that it's all about calories. Hey, in medical school, that's what they told me.
Right.
All right. Doesn't mean it was right. Just means that's what they told me. So that's number one. But, not everybody has a brain tumor.
Right.
All right. Then the question is, all right, what's wrong with everyone else? They're clearly leptin resistant too, because we knew they had high leptin levels.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And we knew that if you're leptin resistant, then you're going to sit on the couch, eat Doritos, and sleep. But you might eat something else too.
And what might that be?
Chocolate cake.
Yeah.
Or, ice cream, maybe like a whole, pint of Ben and Jerry's in one sitting or a quart, etc. So the question was then, all right, what about all of these other patients who don't have brain tumors? They have high insulins too. And it's not because they have a brain tumor. What's wrong with them? Mm-hmm. So in 2006, I was asked to give a talk at the NIH. It was the National Institute of Environmental Health Sciences. And that's in Research Triangle Park. And they were having their 100-year symposium on toxicants and health, especially in children. Okay. And the first day was all of their successes. So lead poisoning and pollution and asthma. And then on the second day was challenges. So the morning was obesity and metabolic syndrome, and the afternoon was going to be ADD and autism. Okay. So they asked me to give a talk on what I thought was the most important factor involved in weight gain and the development of diabetes today. And I'm sure they thought I was going to come up with, something in the furniture, or something in the, in the cleaning materials, or, like or estrogens in the food, etc. They weren't ready for what I ended up coming up with. So I took a tack as I was putting the talk together. I said, all right, I take care of children. Children today get 2 diseases they never got before: type 2 diabetes and fatty liver disease. Okay, prior to 1980, neither of those had ever been seen in a child. And now we have an epidemic of both of them. Right? Where'd this come from? So I knew that type 2 diabetes was a disease of aging. And I knew that fatty liver disease was a disease of alcohol. So I opened up my biochemistry text from 40 years earlier, from college.
MIT, yeah.
From MIT, where I majored in nutritional biochemistry. Yeah. And I said, all right, let me look at the alcohol pathway and see if there's something else that resembles alcohol. And it was right on the next page. Fructose, the sweet molecule in sugar. They're metabolized virtually identically. Right? The big difference between alcohol and sugar is that for alcohol, the yeast does the first step of metabolism called glycolysis. For Sugar, we do our own first step. But after that, what the mitochondria see in your liver or in other cells is exactly the same. They see acetyl-CoA. So this now became an issue of, are the mitochondria being overloaded? And if they're becoming overloaded, what happens to the excess? And the answer is the excess gets shuttled out of the mitochondria through a process called the citrate shuttle. And then the cell uses that acetyl-CoA, that citrate, to form fat. And that process, going from citrate to fat, is called de novo lipogenesis, DNL, new fat making. This is how your liver turns sugar into fat.
Doesn't have the time for it. It's overloaded.
If it's overloaded, what are you going to do? So this is how the liver handles it. Pack it up. Well, sometimes you pack it up and it doesn't leave. So sometimes it leaves, in which case your triglycerides in your blood go up. And that's a, risk factor for obesity and heart disease. And sometimes it doesn't get packed up and leave. And it precipitates in the liver as a lipid droplet. And now you have non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. And you have a risk for diabetes and cirrhosis, which kids were now getting. So I went to this talk at the NIH and I said, I think this is the reason this is happening. And I think that this is the substrate. It's called sugar. And I explained why. And I was the last talk before the bathroom break. And everyone applauded, left, and then they didn't come back. It was time for the next talk, and they didn't come back. And I, where is everyone? So I went outside, kind of had to use the bathroom myself. And they grabbed me outside in the lobby and said, "Oh my God! Oh my God!" These are toxicologists saying, "Oh my God! This makes so much sense. You're right. You're right."
Yeah.
You have to tell everyone this. These are PhD, and MD toxicologists from the NIH.
Right.
Telling me, "Oh my God, sugar is a poison." And then I have to go tell everybody. Well, I've been telling everybody ever since.
You have.
So that's kind of where it came from.
It's amazing that you've made this discovery, that you went back to that textbook, that you were really curious about why this was happening in children. And it is a major issue. Even just seeing with a toddler, I have a 2.5-year-old and an 8-month-old. And, we met through levels, just a continuous glucose monitor that we're both probably wearing at this point. And
I haven't graduated up to it yet. I'm thinking about it.
Yeah, it's just really interesting information. But I think when I think about my children and how often sugar presents itself in their food, and the amount of times that they're offered juice. And I mean, I just signed up my toddler for preschool, and it, was going through the snack time, and it's a nice school with a nice offering of food, and they're using Mary's chicken. And they said, "Our juice is 100% juice. And do you have any notes?" And my notes were, my children don't have any liquid sugar in the form of juice, sports drink, coconut water. And it's just, the moms don't know.
They don't know. And, to be honest with you, a lot of these preschools are using Capri Suns, because of the pouches. Mm-hmm. And if you look, it's not even juice.
No, I know.
So, and it's fortified with more sugar. We have, look, it goes all the way back to Hawaiian Punch. The fact of the matter is we have a problem. Okay. And we have a problem with our health. And we also have a problem with disinformation. Mm-hmm. Now, we know a lot about disinformation, because of the last 5 years. Okay. But this is disinformation, that's basically been promulgated by the food industry. And my colleagues here at UCSF, Laura Schmidt, Kristen Carnes, and Stan Glantz, actually found the paper trail from the Sugar Association during the 1960s and 70s as to how they actually absolved themselves of culpability for heart disease by paying off Harvard School of Public Health scientists to exonerate sugar and finger saturated fat instead as the bad guy. So there's a dark underbelly that has been, hidden from view for 50 years that is now being exposed. But despite the fact that we now have these data and that we're publishing on them, and at UCSF, we now have the Food Industry Documents Library to complement the tobacco industry documents library. And we're actually doing artificial intelligence and, to determine the relationships between tobacco and big food, to figure out if these are the same people saying it. After all, Philip Morris became Altria, which owned Kraft General Foods, and R.J. Reynolds owned Nabisco, for a while. There's a reason for that. And they were using the same tactics. So this disinformation goes back a long way. But despite that, we have made very little inroads and very little headway in terms of getting this information out to consumers and especially to mothers. And so I applaud you for trying to get this information out. And that's why I'm here to help you.
I appreciate it. And your new book, Metabolical, The Lure and the Lies of Processed Food, Nutrition, and Modern Medicine, is out to help us get this information out. It's out right now. I'm going to link it in the show notes. But can we talk about why you decided to write this book? You talk about 8 pathologies that underlie all chronic disease. Can we go through some of those and what you've uncovered in this book?
Absolutely. So let me first explain why I wrote the book. So in 2013, after the famous Sugar Bitter Truth video that I don't know how many it's
13 million plus views. If you haven't, I'm going to actually link that there because I think that if people can take the time to watch is such a great primer.
The good news is that it is now 12 years old. Okay. And nothing in it is wrong. Nothing in it's been shown to be wrong. We now have new data. We have more data. But in fact, if you watch that will suffice. That's enough. And so I'm glad if we ever find out that there's something wrong in it, I'll have to have it, taken down. But I don't think UCTV is going to be very happy taking it down since it's done. So in 2013, I wrote Fat Chance. And the reason I wrote that book then was because the standard mantra from the doctors and the dietitians and the Institute of Medicine and the National Institutes of Health and the Surgeon General and the White House and Congress and the food industry was, you are what you eat. Mm-hmm. Which, by the way, Brias Savarin, the famous French 19th century physiologist, never said. He actually said, tell me what you eat and I will tell you what you are. That got shortened to you are what you eat, and they're not the same. But anyway, that's besides the point. The standard is you are what you eat. And I knew that was not true. I knew it back in 1975 at MIT because they told me different foodstuffs were metabolized in different ways. So I knew that was wrong then. But it became very clear that this is the problem. So I wrote Fat Chance to basically explain to people, you are what you do with what you eat. You are what you metabolize. And different foods are metabolized different ways. So different foods matter, and the calories are irrelevant. All right, fine. Well, in the last 8 years or 9 years since I wrote Fat Chance, it's become very clear that the food industry knew this all along, that, we have that paper trail, we have the subterfuge, we have, their malfeasance. And so I had to rewrite this with, updating the data, but also updating the politics so that basically Metabolical says you are what they did with what you eat.
Right.
So that's why Metabolical is so important. It's half science and half expose. If this were a Hollywood, book, we would call it a kiss and tell, but it's because it's about diabetes. It's really a piss and tell.
That was a good joke. You can taste the sweetness in the urine.
Yes, you can. So the key, there are a couple of key points to Metabolical. The first is the diseases that we call diseases aren't diseases. All right. So let me list those diseases for you that are not diseases. Type 2 diabetes, hypertension, dyslipidemia, cardiovascular disease, cancer, dementia, fatty liver disease, polycystic ovarian disease. These are not diseases. These are symptoms of an underlying metabolic dysfunction. They are symptoms. And we are not treating the disease underlying those. We are treating the symptoms. And if you treat the symptoms, you're treating the result. You have to treat the cause. The way I describe it in the book is, you have a wasp buzzing around your attic. What are you going to do? Kill the wasp? Or find and destroy the wasp's nest? You have to work upstream of a problem to solve a problem. Working downstream of a problem only solves the results of the problem. It doesn't fix the cause. Guess what? The cause is still there and is still going to come and bite you. All right? And that's what we've been doing in modern medicine for the last 50 years, is treating the symptoms. Okay, what we've been doing is like giving an aspirin to a patient with a brain tumor because they have a headache. All right? Might help the headache, ain't going to do a damn thing for the brain tumor.
Right.
And that's what we've been doing with all 8 of these diseases that I just mentioned. And not one of those 8 has a cure. There's not one that has a treatment that actually reverses the process. They will treat the symptoms. So the high LDL, yeah, we have statins. Yeah, the high blood pressure, we have antihypertensives. Yeah, the high blood glucose, we have oral hypoglycemics. Sure. Okay, but the horse is out of the barn. It's doing damage irrespective of those, high blood pressure, or high blood glucose, or high LDL. Okay, the point is, we are not fixing that. And the reason we are not fixing that is because those diseases are only the symptoms of the underlying subcellular pathologies. And so in the book, I go through what the real cause of disease is. And in the book, I call them the hateful or grateful 8. With apologies to Quentin Tarantino. So these are subcellular processes that go on in every cell in your body all the time. But they can go well or they can go badly. When they're going well, you'll be 110 playing tennis. When they go badly, you'll be in a wheelchair at age 40 with 2 stumps on a dialysis machine waiting for your next stroke. That's your range. Right. Okay? 110 playing tennis, 40 years old with 2 stumps. Okay? And everything in between, based on these 8 subcellular processes. And that's why they're the hateful or grateful 8, depending on what you do with them.
Right.
So I'm going to name them real fast. Okay? And there's no ICD-11 code for any of these. Doctors don't know what they are, don't discuss them with their patients. And the reason is because there's no medicine that fixes any of them.
Right.
All right. So here they are, because your doctor doesn't know them. 1, glycation. 2, oxidative stress. 3, mitochondrial dysfunction. 4, insulin resistance. 5, membrane instability. 6, inflammation. 7, methylation. 8, autophagy. Now, each of these...
I know what those are.
Well,
I was like, these are going to be over my head. No.
Your listeners need to know what they are.
That's true.
Okay? And the doctors need to know what they are. And they don't.
Right.
Because there's no medicine for any of them.
Right.
There are lifestyle changes that will affect them in either a positive or negative fashion. And that's why you get sick or you don't. The point is, every single one of those diseases is potentially reversible. Even cancer. Potentially even dementia. Potentially. Don't know that yet. Working on it. All right? So there are things you can do. You are not powerless. You're not powerless for any of these chronic diseases. None of them are a death sentence. None of them are a fait accompli. And just because your parents had it doesn't mean you have to.
Right.
Okay? The reason is because every one of these is food related. Okay. And the reason your parents had it is because they ate the same shit you do.
Right.
That's why. So understanding what's going on with these 8 pathologies is everything in terms of both metabolic and, now we know, mental health.
It's amazing that you've grouped these together, because just looking at autophagy and our ability to get rid of those bad cells, methylation, our ability to get rid of toxins from the cell, mitochondria, our ability to produce energy, our ability to use insulin instead of having insulin resistance. I mean, you're bucketing our ability to manage the food that we eat in a productive way and making sure that the food that we eat isn't causing things like oxidative stress.
So everyone's, still married to calories.
Right.
Okay. We're promoting this notion of metabolic health, that ultimately that should be the determining factor as to whether a food is healthy or not, as to whether it contributes to metabolic health or not. And there are 2 factors, and the book explains this. There are 2 factors that determine whether any given food is healthy or not. 2. Okay. Michael Pollan famously said, eat food, not too much, mostly plants. All incorrect.
Okay.
All incorrect. All right. 7 words, 3 clauses, and each clause is incorrect. Eat food. Is Cheetos food? Not too much. How do you do that?
Yeah. Self-control. Right. Not going to happen.
Really? Really?
Not completely overridden by
Turns
desire.
out when your leptin sensitivity returns, you won't eat too much. So you can biochemically improve your leptin sensitivity by getting your insulin down, because insulin blocks leptin. So the higher your insulin, the less well your brain sees the leptin, and the hungrier you get. So the not too much means getting your insulin down. Okay. And then the mostly plants, I don't even want to go, that also. Just remember, Coke, Doritos, and Oreos are vegan. They're mostly plants. In fact, they're all plants. Okay. And they're the worst thing you can eat. All right. So those 7 words don't work. So I have 2 clauses instead of 3, 6 words instead of 7. And here are the 6 words. Protect the liver, feed the gut. Any food that does both is healthy. Any food that does neither is not food, it's poison. And any food that does one or the other, but not both, is somewhere in the middle. And the empiric data that's been demonstrated from either nutritional epidemiology or, randomized controlled trials actually supports this contention that this is the way to determine the metabolic health of any individual foodstuff or of any dietary pattern. Protect the liver, feed the gut. Now, protect the liver from what? All right? Protect the liver from simple sugars, glucose, fructose, sucrose, high starch content, refined carbohydrate and sugar. Protect the liver from branched chain amino acid excess, leucine, isoleucine, valine, which is found in corn-fed beef, chicken, and fish.
And also people who take BCAAs. And
people who take protein powder. So if you're building muscle, because you're a bodybuilder, fine. Then you need them. Okay, because muscle, is 20% BCAAs. All right? But what if you're not? What if you're a mere mortal like me? Eating excess BCAAs, there's no place to store them because you're not building muscle. So, what's going to happen to them? Well, they go to the liver. The liver takes the amino group off. Now they become branched chain organic acids. They went from branched chain amino acids to branched chain organic acids. They go into the mitochondria, and the mitochondria become overwhelmed, just like we talked about before with sugar. And the liver throws off citrate. And guess what? Fatty liver and insulin resistance, etc. So overeating corn-fed beef, chicken, fish, i.e. processed meat, is also a problem. All right. So also protect the liver from heavy metals like cadmium and protect the liver from glyphosate, protect the liver from obesogens, like phthalates and,
parabens.
Pesticides, and parabens and pesticides, etc. So there's a lot in that, but basically protect the liver. Everyone thinks, your liver is very hardy. All right.
What are some foods that are good for the liver? So we've touched on simple sugars, processed, all that stuff that we got to eat.
Every food that's real food is good for the liver. Okay. I have a T-shirt that a colleague just sent me, which I should have worn today, just for you. On the front, it says Logan's Bar and Grill, but it's what's on the back that's interesting. It says, "The liver is evil. It must be punished."
Oh my gosh. That's good humor.
Yep. Because it's a bar and grill.
Yeah.
It must be punished. Well, the fact of the matter is, the more you punish it, the sicker you get.
Right.
Okay. And obviously the way everyone knows you can punish your liver is alcohol. But the fact of the matter is, you can punish it in many different ways. And you can punish it with food.
Right.
And the goal is not to. All right. So protect the liver. Number 2, feed the gut. So that's 6 words, right? Protect the liver, feed the gut. But feed the gut what? And why do you have to feed the gut? Well, turns out in your intestine, there are 100 trillion bacteria. You only have 10 trillion cells in your body. You have 100 trillion bacteria in your intestine. Your bacteria actually outnumber you 10 to 1. Each of us is really just a big bag of bacteria with legs. Now, those bacteria have to eat something. The question is, what do they eat? Well, they eat what you eat. The question is, how much did you get versus how much did they get? And it turns out, if they don't get what they need, number one, they send signals via your bloodstream or your nervous system to your brain telling you to eat more. And number 2, they will eat the mucin layer, the protective barrier layer, right off your intestinal epithelial cells, thus denuding your intestinal epithelium. And the bacteria can be seen to apose, with an A, right on top of the intestinal epithelium on confocal microscopy. Right? And that is the generator of leaky gut, irritable bowel syndrome, inflammatory bowel disease. And that generates more insulin resistance and makes things even worse. So you have to feed the gut, or your gut will feed on you. So what does the gut eat? And the answer is fiber. The gut likes fiber. So basically the fiber in your diet is, you don't derive any calories from it. So people think it's not a nutrient because if it doesn't get absorbed, it wasn't a nutrient. Okay. It's not a nutrient for you. It's a nutrient for your bacteria. But that's even more important.
Right.
So people, they juice the fruit and then they throw the juice, the pulp in the garbage. Turned out the fiber was the good part of the fruit.
Yeah.
The juice is the bad part of the fruit. The juice is nature's way of getting you to eat your fiber.
Right.
All right. And, we're ignoring it. And, so at your preschool, they're giving the kids juice, Now there is soluble fiber still in the juice, but you need both soluble and insoluble. Fiber does 6 things in your intestine that are important. And soluble fiber only does 2 of them. So it does a little bit, but it doesn't do nearly as much as the whole package, the fruit, as opposed to the juice. And people think, well, the juice and the fruit are the same thing. No, they are not. Not even remotely. And this is another subterfuge of the food industry, because they don't want you to focus on fiber because you can't freeze fiber. And the food industry knows that. I'll prove it to you. take an orange, put it in your freezer, take it out the next day, put it on the counter, let it thaw, try to eat it, see what you get. You get mush.
Yeah.
Why do you get mush? The ice crystals macerate the cell wall, let all the water rush in. Hey, food industry knows that. So what do? Squeeze it and freeze it. Now it lasts forever. Frozen concentrated orange juice. All right. So a fruit is a fruit. A can of frozen concentrated orange juice is a commodity.
Mm-hmm.
Sell it on the commodities exchange because it never goes bad. And that's the definition of commodity, storable food.
Right.
Okay. And you can then manipulate the price. You can, because of the no depreciation, you can sell it at a profit all over the world and you make money because there's no depreciation. Sick. And you make people sick. Right.
So you've pulled back the veil on the food industry and you've given us this very simple sentence to live by: protect the liver, feed the gut. Can we talk about what a day in the life might look like if you're protecting the liver and feeding the gut? What is a day in the life of you when it comes to protecting the liver, feeding the gut for food look like?
Well, you mean like what would you eat?
Yeah.
Is that what you mean?
Yeah.
Well, like in the morning, how about bacon and eggs?
I love it.
How about steel cut oats? Oatmeal made from steel cut oats. Okay, not from packets. Okay, coffee, black coffee. There are a host of, options, around this concept. Bread is not immediately off the list, but you have to buy the right bread. So there's this thing called whole grain bread. And everybody says, whole grain. Garbage. Because there's no definition of whole grain at the FDA or the USDA. If it started with whole grain, they can call it whole grain. Mm-hmm. All right? Even if they've destroyed all the grains, even if they've pulverized them to smithereens. The fiber is a husk, right? It circles the starch or the endosperm. And inside there's the germ also. Now, one of the things the food industry likes to do is they like to remove the germ. And the reason they like to remove the germ is because that's where the polyphenols, that's where the micronutrients, the various the nucleic acids. Okay,
all the phytochemicals,
the phytochemicals that are actually good for you, okay, and help you survive and improve all those 8 subcellular processes. That's where they're hiding, is in the germ. Okay, the problem is all of those biochemicals can be oxidized. They can all go rancid. And so sitting on a shelf makes them go rancid. And so the food industry likes to get rid of them. So they can start with whole grain and still remove those things and still call it whole grain. How do you tell a real good whole grain bread from bad whole grain bread? All right? It's very simple. If you take a pound of bread each, okay? If you can take that pound of bread and throw it at someone's head and knock them out and knock them unconscious, and give them a concussion, okay, then it's good. If the bread is spongy, filled with air, blown up to 4 times its size, okay, and you throw it against somebody's head and it bounces off and then they say, "What the hell did you do that for?" Then it's bad. Real whole grain bread, like German fitness bread, which you can find at, say, Whole Foods or, Molly Stone's or, whichever, high-end grocery you want to go to. Okay, that's the bread you should be eating. Now, the slices are very thin. It makes a really lousy sandwich. It makes a pretty good avocado toast, but it makes a lousy sandwich. And the reason is because it has no sponginess to it. And the reason is because the grains have not been disrupted.
You have to keep it in the refrigerator from growing mold.
That's right. So but these are the tricks that you have to know and how the food industry basically hides the ball so that you don't know any of these things.
Yeah.
And they tell you that whole grain bread is whole grain bread. No, it's not. Because as soon as you macerate that grain, it's not whole.
Right. Taking the good stuff out. Let's circle back.
That's an example. That's an example.
It.
That's breakfast. Lunch can be, again, piece of grilled chicken. I mean, I'm not, quote, plant forward. I mean, I have nothing against plants. I'm not anti-vegan. I'm just not pro-vegan.
Right.
I'm not pro-keto. I mean, basically, all these foods work because all of them are real. Okay. And if you want to be vegan, I'm not against it. Okay. Do it right. Okay. If you're doing Coke, Doritos, and Oreos, you are not, that's not vegan, really. I mean, it is, but it isn't. And you have to understand the difference. Okay. You have to understand the fiber is the reason why vegan is good. Okay. And there's no fiber in Coke, Doritos, and Oreos. So, this is the key. The fact of the matter is the ketos and the vegans are actually on the same side.
Yeah, I read that you wrote that the advocates of plant-based and keto lifestyles are actually the same side. They just don't know it. How so?
Right. Well, because they're consuming real food.
Right.
Okay. I mean, yes, they're getting their energy source from a slightly different place, but ultimately both protect the liver and both feed the gut. So they should be banding together against their common enemy, the processed food industry, rather than fighting amongst and skirmishing amongst themselves. Food industry loves nothing better than to basically create, controversy, because that's disruptive. We learned that in the last 5 years too.
Right. In your opinion, what's the best way for consumers, parents, and people who understand the science to fight back against big food industry? And what would you wish would happen in regards to, like, whether it's, laws or something that keeps these guys in check?
Right. Well, that's, sort of the $64 zillion question. But there are two issues. There's what can you do personally, and then there's what can you do societally.
Yeah.
They're not the same, and they require different tactics. So the first question, and the one I want to sort of pose to your audience, and I want you to think about this really, really carefully, is processed food food? Yes or no? Is processed food food? Well, in order to answer that question, you have to know the definition of food. Right? Now, I will tell you that the FDA has the stupidest definition for food ever, because it's in the Food, Drug, and Cosmetics Act of 1938. The definition of food is any substance used as food or drink for humans. Now, the first rule of vocabulary is you're not allowed to use the word in the definition.
Right.
So screw that. So let's go to Webster's. Okay. And I'm paraphrasing slightly, but this is the basic tenet of the Webster's definition. A substrate that contributes to the growth or burning of an organism. Let's take that. All right. A substrate that contributes to the growth and or burning of an organism. So under that rubric, you would say, well, sugar is energy, right? Mm-hmm. So therefore, sugar is a food.
Yeah.
Sugar is a food, according to them, right? Wait, just wait. Turns out it is true that sugar, when you throw it into a bomb calorimeter, it releases 4 calories per gram. Mm-hmm. That's true. That's the calorie concept. Mm-hmm. Okay. But what if sugar inhibits 3 separate mitochondrial enzymes that actually inhibit ATP generation inside your cells? AMP kinase, ACAD-L, acyl-CoA dehydrogenase long chain, and CPT1, carnitine palmitoyltransferase 1. Thus, you are inhibiting energy generation with sugar. So, all of a sudden, maybe it doesn't fit the criteria of something that contributes to energy burning because it inhibits mitochondrial function, inhibits energy production utilization. Number two, contributes to growth. What if something inhibits growth? What if it actually stops growing? My colleague at Hebrew University, Jerusalem, Efrat Mansenigo Ornan, has shown that ultra-processed food actually inhibits growth, linear growth. And insulin blocks normal growth. So the insulin resistance generated by ultra-processed food actually causes alterations in growth in such a way as to be detrimental and cause disease. So, is processed food food?
No.
If it inhibits growth and inhibits energy burning. In fact, processed food is poison. If it doesn't protect the liver, if it floods the liver, and if it starves the gut, it's poison. So you have to know that when you go to the grocery store. And if you know that, then you will vote. And you vote with your fork 21 times a week. So that's what you can do for yourself. And you can explain that to your children, why you're not bringing, the Fruit Loops home anymore. That's the personal side, the individual side. Now, the societal side, that gets a little more complicated because obviously each of us is sort of powerless ourselves. On the other hand, if we all banded together, we could have quite a bit of power. So, it takes a lot of effort here. And there are still lots of people on the other side, even within the academic community. But I'm doing my best to try to undo that. All right. I think, people ask me all the time, if you had a magic wand and you could do one thing, like what would you do? What would you fix to try to solve this problem? And I have one thing that I would fix if I had a magic wand.
What would it be?
I would get rid of all food subsidies.
Yeah.
All food subsidies. Subsidies distort the market. Subsidies make the industry use things that maybe they don't want to use, and subsidies make people consume things they might not want to consume. They distort the market. There is no economist on the planet that believes in subsidies because they distort the market. And what do we subsidize? We subsidize the things that kill us: corn, wheat, soy, sugar. Right. All right. So what people say, well, if you did that, the price of food would go up. Actually not. So the Giannini Foundation at UC Berkeley did this exercise. They've modeled what would the price of food look like if we got rid of all food subsidies. They have to be all, you can't pick and choose, all food subsidies. And the answer is the price of food would not change, except for two items: corn and sugar.
We need to make those more expensive anyways.
But the point is we need to eat less of both of those. And so that's actually a good thing. All right. So in fact, that's where I would start. And I would even argue that until that happens, anything else we do societally will not be effective. It's that important. So that's where I would start. And the problem is the U.S. government is wrapped up in food subsidies, the Farm Bill, and the processed food industry, they are addicted to those subsidies. They've been sucking at the teat of government, for decades and decades and decades. And, they make money that way because what they're using is subsidized. So they're not going to give this up. This is their golden goose. This is, this is their gravy train. This is their juggernaut. They're not just going to snap their fingers and say, all right, end the subsidies. Right? But that's what has to happen. So the question is, how do you make that happen? The answer is, well, you got to have the economists. We got to have the voters. Okay? Because there have to be more votes than dollars. That's the key. So that takes education. And that's what we're doing right now.
Right. Is there any way is there anything online that we can sign to support, to that we can throw in the show notes for people to head to the show notes and see where they can start?
Well, not yet in terms of that, but that's a good point, and we need to move that forward. I'm trying to do what I can. We have a nonprofit called Eat Real, trying to get, real foods into K through 12 schools around the country. In Contra Costa County, in one school district, the Mount Diablo School District, we got rid of 270,000 pounds of sugar in 1 year from one school district. 10 pounds of sugar per kid, 27,000 students.
Wow.
So, we're doing what we can, but yes, basically the game is rigged because of the subsidies.
Right.
And so, that has to be really, really job one. Now, there are other things too that have to happen. One thing that I like to talk about is called differential subsidization. Why can't we tax the bad food and use the money from the tax to subsidize the good food? So that's actually been done in a different way in the Nordic countries, Norway, Sweden, Denmark, and I describe this in the book. 1977. Norway, Sweden, Denmark, huge alcohol problem. Okay? Because it's cold and it's dank and it's damp. Okay. And it's nighttime and, people, and there was no Netflix.
Yeah.
And so people drank themselves to death. Okay. And you could see the detriments of alcohol on both sides of the ledger. You could see it on the positive side of the ledger in terms of productivity. And you can see it on the negative side of the ledger in terms of cirrhosis of the liver and car accidents. Mm-hmm. Okay. So the three countries banded together and they passed two pieces of legislation together. Okay. That were yoked together. The first was they nationalized all the liquor stores in all three countries. So the price was the price and the fare was the fare, and you couldn't go somewhere else and buy it cheaper. Okay. The price was the price. The second thing they did was they taxed high alcohol spirits and used the money from the tax to subsidize low alcohol beer. So it was a zero-sum game for the countries. They didn't, make money off of it. But what they did was they redistributed the purchases. And what happened was because they provided both the inducement and the punishment, the carrot and the stick, and they were yoked together, they nudged people away from high alcohol spirits and toward a low alcohol beer. And sure enough, over the next 20 years, car accidents and cirrhosis of the liver go down, productivity goes up, plateaued, and those, two pieces of legislation are still in place today, 40 some odd years later, because they worked.
Right.
Right? And the reason they worked was because the carrot and the stick were yoked together. So how could we use that in America? Why don't we tax soda and subsidize water?
So smart.
The beverage industry makes both. They're not out anything.
I mean, this is it seems like such a simple way to have change where you're not impacting the beverage industry in a way that they're going to fight back against you.
Well,
putting it right back in their pocket.
They're afraid.
Yeah.
They're afraid.
Well, if we could just clone you, it is just really amazing because not only are you educating your audience and you've done this for over a decade, is you've uncovered the root cause of fatty liver disease, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease in our youth. We've pinpointed the issue. We've shown how it's affecting us metabolically from, mitochondrial dysfunction to disease states, these chronic diseases that you say aren't diseases like PCOS, type 2 diabetes, hypertension, all reversible with food and understanding how our metabolism and how our cells work, how we can protect those processes, those 8 processes you talk about, the grateful 8. Let's be on the grateful side of that. I would hope for that for everyone, because I want them to be playing tennis in 110. And for everyone out there, I'm going to put all of this in the show notes. There's so much meaty information here. And I know today was just top line with Rob. And I do want to call you Dr. Lustig because you've worked so hard at that. But I know you aren't. I'll put it all in the show notes. I'll link out to his YouTube, his other books, and definitely Metabolical. This is, like you said, an expose and education in one book, and definitely something all of the moms out there should get their hands on for their kids. We need to protect our children, pull out the sugar, and give them that quality of life that low insulin and leptin sensitivity can give our children.
Yep.
That spontaneous movement, like that. The
thing that parents need to understand is that when they observe their child, what they are observing is a complex set of biochemical processes. And if they are, attuned and understand what they're looking at, which is, of course, what we go to medical school to ultimately learn how to do, okay, they can actually see the biochemicals at work. And that's what I do. And if, all parents, had just enough, shall we say, education regarding how this works, they could see it too. And then they would say, I want what's right for my child, not what the food industry says is right for my child.
That's right. I love it. Thank you so much for being here, for inspiring our moms and dads, for getting this information out to the public, because I really do believe that education empowers us to make those hard choices, to say no to sugar, say no to processed foods, and to enact change, whether that's the 21 times we have in a week to decide for ourselves, but even just getting out there and trying to support actual lawful change in the world to lower this. And
you can't solve a problem if you don't know what the problem is.
That's right. Calories don't count, they backfire.
They do, and they have for 50 years. And worse yet, the dietitians, when they see that it backfires, they blame the patient, say, well, they were non-compliant.
Right.
We got to fix that.
Absolutely. Let's beat the drum and make it happen. Thank you for being here, Rob. I'll throw everything in the show notes. We'll make sure and get this up so everyone can see it. I really appreciate your time. I know you're a busy guy, and I appreciate your work.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me, Kelly.
Thank you for listening to Be Well by Kelly. Please subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Learn more at bewellbykelly.com and follow me on Instagram at bewellbykelly. I would love if you picked up my books, Body Love and Body Love Every Day. They're sold on Amazon and at all major booksellers.